Okay.
So much to get to on the show today. Christian Gokel alongside Cam Ursery and PJ Zuko. I have a big college football weekend to dive into. We'll get you our picks tomorrow. Also going to be breaking down the final game of this NLDS because that will determine where the Braves play game one of the NLCS. Could either be on the road at San Francisco or you could be home against the Los Angeles Dodgers. So we'll dive into all of that. Georgia Southern has a big conference game coming up tonight. We'll dive into that. But I want to do an exercise here, and I was trying to do some math. Cam and I worked PJ before the show, and so PJ is coming into this raw.
Yep.
Great.
Because I want to do kind of an experiment here because Cam brought up an interesting point. This might take a while, but I'm here for it.
Okay. All right.
Well, because the conundrum is this. If Georgia beats Kentucky on Saturday, Kentucky will obviously have one loss, but the rest of their schedule is extremely manageable for Kentucky. There's no reason why they don't go 11-1. Right? After this, you have Mississippi State and Tennessee. Kentucky will probably be favored in both of those, even though Tennessee's putting up 1 million points a game right now. Kentucky will be favored in both of those. And then you got Louisville remaining on the schedule.
Mm-hmm.
I think you got Cupcake on the schedule in there as well. So there's a really distinct chance, even if Kentucky loses this game, they go 11-1. Over in the West, I think I would probably have Ole Miss favored in the rest of their games, maybe Texas A&M, but they get them at home. So there's a distinct chance Ole Miss can go 11-1.
I don't like what you're doing here.
Say somehow Stetson Bennett throws a few interceptions. Kentucky pulls the upset. They ain't losing 2 games to get Georgia back in the SEC championship. They're undefeated going into the SEC championship. They lose to a 1-loss Alabama. So all of a sudden you have 11-1 Ole Miss, 11-1 Georgia, 12-1 Alabama, and 12-1 Kentucky.
All right.
Fire. Yeah.
Yeah.
It gets worse though. Just wait.
It gets so much worse. Potentially Oregon can run the table as a conference champion. They could be 12-1. You could have Penn State lose to Ohio State and they're 10-2, right? But then you still have Michigan and Michigan State out there who have to play, and say Penn State beats both of them, beats 2 undefeated teams, and those teams have to play Ohio State as well. They would all have 2 losses. But Penn State would have 2 wins over potentially top 20 teams right there. So you still have Penn State hanging out there.
It's not helping us right now.
Ohio State, but Ohio State, if we had to guess right now, Ohio State's going to run the table and win the Big Ten.
Agreed. Yeah.
Just history tells you that kind of.
But what would that mean? You would have 12-1 Ohio State.
Yeah.
Against potentially, and I think this is going to happen because they've already played the hard part of their schedule, 12-1 Iowa. Because Iowa would come into that conference championship game undefeated.
Yeah. No,
and if they lose to Ohio State, they're 12-1.
Yeah. I think Iowa might, honestly. I think Iowa might be there undefeated because there's not a lot of good teams in the West. Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy.
But
they need to rearrange that though. Me and you talked about
We've talked about that a lot.
They gotta rearrange that.
It's crazy.
It's unbalanced.
Yeah.
And
so very much.
And the way Cam and I were extrapolating out the ACC, I think Clemson, they only have 1 loss, but it was to NC State, who still, that's their only conference win. But I think the rest of their schedule is super manageable. Like, I think they'd be favored over most people they're playing the rest of the way. So NC State could win out. Pitt has 1 loss right now, and they have 2 big matchups coming up. You have Virginia Tech and Clemson coming up, but they could split one of those and still go to the conference championship.
Right.
And so is anybody out of the ACC have a chance? Or say Wake Forest loses their matchup coming up against NC State, and Wake Forest is sitting there at 11-1 at the end of the year.
I would not to ruin what you're doing here because it's crazy, and I'm all for crazy, and I'm all for madness. If I would guess,
ruin it for me, PJ.
I would say anyone. I'm not ruining all of it. I would say anyone from the ACC is even 1 loss is not going to make it, especially in this scenario. because no matter
What
what,
if it's
no
what if it is
matter what
one
their
loss, one loss Wake Forest, but they lost to NC State, but beat Clemson the next week, and then beat Boston College?
well, it's fine. I don't think your wins are better than anyone else's wins, and I think your losses are worse than everyone else's losses. I mean, even if you lose to NC State, I think that's a worse loss than Texas A&M, Alabama losing to Texas A&M. It's obviously a worse loss than Kentucky losing to Georgia or Georgia losing to Kentucky. Obviously a worse loss than Penn State losing to Iowa or Ohio State losing to Michigan. You know what I mean? So
See, this is what makes it interesting.
that's kind of where I'm at with that.
12-team format.
So
That's
that's
what we
that's
basing it
that's where I wanted to get to.
Yeah.
12-team format I love. Like this is great.
This would be.
I've had
insane.
4 teams in my mind the whole time you going through this, and I'm just like, this is
Yeah,
a cluster.
put it like we
How you
talked
choose
about it.
4 out of that's insane.
We talked about it earlier. Like this would be literally the perfect college football season for a 12.
Every season's the
playoff.
perfect college football season.
Yeah, but I think this. I mean, it's so many teams that can go with like 1 or 2 losses and be viable for a college football, spot.
I mean,
especially a
you know
12-team
who we're
playoff.
forgetting about is one loss Arizona State. So like
Yeah,
right now, tell me
yeah.
who wins a game between Oregon and Arizona State?
Right now, I mean, Arizona State's not a bad football team
Because they don't play each other in the regular season.
Yeah, they're not on neutral site.
Just tell me who wins that game.
Right now, with their injuries and with how they're playing, Arizona State would win that
So
game.
Arizona
because
State would potentially
Oregon's not who they were.
would be
a
our
month ago.
12-1 rep from-
You gotta one of Oregon's, a couple of Oregon's best players have been lost for the season. Defensively, they lost. What's his name in the secondary for the
Yeah.
season, and then they just lost their starting running back for the seat. Like Oregon's not the same team they were when they beat Ohio State. Sadly,
All right, so and then Coastal Carolina, nobody's going to beat them this year. They have the worst, or one of the worst. I think it's like either depending on who you follow, it's like 125 to 130th in the strength of schedule.
yeah,
And they haven't got a lot of help because like Louisiana dropping that one to Texas, even though Louisiana since then has won 5 in a row, but they haven't really got any help from anyone else. And then Louisiana just absolutely demolished App State on, was that Wednesday? No, it's Tuesday night.
Yeah.
So Coastal's going to go undefeated. And so you'd have a 13-0 Coastal Carolina. So if we're extrapolating out a 12-team college football playoff and you're going through and you're looking at the different conferences, you have, the way that we've heard it is the 6 highest ranked conference champions get in. So I think you can put 2 G5 teams in there right now and say it would be Coastal Carolina and it would be Cincinnati would make the playoffs as 2 of the G5 conference champions, right? But moving through that, you'd have Alabama as the SEC champion. I'm going to say Georgia wins out. Georgia beats Kentucky, gets the SEC championship, and then loses to Alabama. So you have that situation I was talking about where you have 1 loss conference champion Alabama, 1 loss SEC East Division champion Georgia, 1 loss Kentucky, whose only loss was to the SEC East champ, and 1 loss Ole Miss, whose only loss was to the SEC West SEC conference champion Alabama.
right.
Oof.
So I think those 4 teams make the playoff,
Agreed.
right?
Yeah.
But what conference champion doesn't get an auto bid? Would it be 12-1 Arizona State?
I wouldn't say I give Arizona State.
What if it's 11-2
Not
Clemson?
Nah, I pick Arizona State over Clemson because
Either of you, do either of you know who Arizona State lost to?
Yes, BYU.
BYU,
By 10.
Who was a top 10 team
pretty
for a
high
little
ranked
bit,
team. Yeah.
Yeah.
but then they got beat by
For a
2 and
while.
3 Boise State last week.
Since
Yeah.
then, they've handled business though.
Boise State just does that to
Firmly.
people, though. You know what I mean? I mean, they
But I just
just
think it gives you. I just think like this season shows, and Pete Thamel from Yahoo Sports is reporting that it's expected to get pushed through the 12-team format.
Yeah.
But I don't understand the counter arguments. So it's like you're
I
going to
never
tell
have, yeah.
but you're going to tell me, like, say Georgia wins this game 24-13, which just seems like a score.
Yeah.
Right. You have Chris Rodriguez break a touchdown, but beyond that, Georgia's defense is stout, and then Stetson Bennett scores enough points. Georgia gets the win, and then they win out and lose to Alabama. Like, tell me that couldn't happen, right?
Yeah.
You're going to look at me and say Kentucky doesn't deserve to be a playoff team because they lost by 11 to the then number 1 team in the country.
under the 12-team playoff.
But think
No,
about the
yeah.
3-game stretch they have. Florida, LSU, Georgia. How many teams in the country would go undefeated in that?
Yeah,
Not
not
a
a lot.
lot.
Yeah,
Nah.
Maybe 2.
right. Especially this season when everyone's
I know LSU's not
everyone's having
great.
bad
I know
games,
LSU's
you know?
not great.
But yeah, you still have to. It's still LSU.
But
though.
Florida, LSU at Georgia.
Yeah.
And you're going to hold Kentucky out and say, yo, y'all don't deserve to make it. You didn't play in the conference championship game.
Kind of like they did A&M last year. I didn't like that at all. Putting in Notre.
But like, what's
I
the
just didn't
counter
like
argument?
What's the counter argument
To a 12
team playoff? I don't know, and I don't like any of the counter arguments. So
It's like,
you're
can
not going to find me
but, like,
arguing
can you,
against
because
it.
you don't really have the overlap. Can you really like look at me and say Cincinnati's better than Kentucky?
Yeah, the only counter argument I've heard that again I don't like because they're settling it on the field is the blowouts, quote unquote, that we've seen in some of the semifinal games already, and people saying, "Oh, you really want to see more of that?" I don't care if they're blowouts or not. You gave the other team a chance, and they didn't win the game. They didn't show up. They weren't good that
But
day.
no,
care.
Say somehow Penn State wins out, except for that Ohio State game. They lose to Ohio State, and so
Right.
you're sitting there, can't go to the conference championship,
10-2. Yeah,
10-2, and one of the losses that kept you out is because you lost your quarterback when you were up 17-13 at Iowa.
and lost. Actually, I'd say 2 defensive stars. One's now out for the season as well.
Yeah.
All in the first quarter.
Yep.
So that's worth note as well for sure.
And like came in with 3 interceptions as a team and left with 7.
Yeah.
So it's just
There's no way a 2-loss Penn State wouldn't make it. I mean, they would have to be Michigan top 10, Michigan State top 10. You beat Auburn.
but there's no way they make it right now.
no, yeah, right now, no.
Right. Yeah.
And
So that's
the
my
messed up
point
thing.
is
Yeah.
what's the counter argument? Because you can't tell me that you know for a fact, say Ole Miss is better than Penn State.
Yeah.
Right.
Like you can't tell me that you know for a fact that Cincinnati's better than Penn State.
True.
Yep.
Like, what it comes
and
down
same,
to
and
is
same way
precon-
the other way around, right?
It comes down to the preconceived biases, and it comes down to, oh, well, I look at the record and their record's cleaner than your record.
right.
I hate that. I hate that it's like that. They're looking at records now instead of like.
Well, that's
I
how
look
it's
at the
always been in
resume,
college.
the eye test.
But that's
I
how it's
hate
always been in college football. It's
Yep.
you determine it based off the record.
because the last good national championship we had was what, like 18 Georgia and Alabama. That was the last close game they had. In
Yeah, the rest of them blowouts. A majority of the college football playoff games are blowouts.
blowouts.
And I think that's typically because you either have 1 or 2 really dominant teams,
Mhm.
and then everyone else like just made it, like you said, based off of, oh, well, they're the conference champion and they only had 1 loss.
Right.
But how many 1-loss conference champions have been left out?
Ooh.
Well,
Um,
I think you can look at those years though. I don't know. It's not like every game in the BCS era was competitive. I think that's the problem is like I think people start coming at the college football playoff and things like that because of those blowouts. But
Yeah.
maybe the years were just like that. Like no one was beating LSU the year they won the national
2019, no.
championship. No one was.
And I think in 2018 when Alabama won and beat Georgia on the walk-off, I think you had 3 really good teams that could have beat
Exactly.
anyone on any given. Like Clemson wasn't great because it was they were a year ahead, right? Because you had Kelly Bryant as a starting quarterback, you had that defensive line, but it wasn't what we saw the year before,
Mhm.
right? It wasn't that
16.
Yeah, it wasn't
With
that
Deshaun?
defense. Yeah, it wasn't that defense.
team's good.
Right, and you didn't have Deshaun Watson, right? 2017, you have Alabama, who is amazing. You have Georgia, who is unbelievable, and then you have Oklahoma with Baker Mayfield.
Yeah.
And I think those 3 teams could have beaten the other 3 if you kept playing it over and over and over again. It probably would have come out pretty even, right?
And-
Sometimes you
yeah.
have that, and then sometimes you have last year,
Right.
where it's
right,
just
exactly.
Alabama and everybody else.
Yeah, and you take your pick over the last 9 or 10 years. Basically, you can put it in a hat, right? You're either going to pick out Alabama or you're going to pick out Clemson, and there's other caveats to that. You have 2019 LSU. You have Georgia, the year they went into overtime with Alabama, and having 3 good teams there. But let's be honest, this has been a dominant run by Clemson and Alabama, and I don't think that's solely because of the college football playoff. I think that's because 2 programs have just been incredible
I
and
think Clemson,
have had
and I don't want to take away from what Clemson did, because Clemson won 2 national championships
yeah.
in there, but I think Clemson also took advantage, and I think this way you can argue with like some Big Ten teams, is the opposite of this. Is Clemson took advantage of the ACC being really down
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
during that run, and so but we talk about this as the windows, right? ACC's down. I have
Exactly.
Trevor Lawrence. Just get me there, and then it's a 2-game scenario, right? Whereas you have Big Ten teams like we're seeing this year, where you literally have 4 of the top 10 are in one division right now.
Yeah. One division. Yeah.
4 of the top 10
Messed
teams
up.
in the country reside in the Big Ten, like East, or there's like Freedom.
Yeah.
Is it like the Liberty division?
No, it's not any of that
it's
anymore.
the East.
It's like the SEC West from what,
Yeah.
6 years ago or
Yeah.
so?
And so it's like you have
wild.
4 of the top 10 teams in one division. They're having to go through a bloodbath to
Yeah.
get there, and it's because of one Saturday you won't make it.
Mhm.
And so Clemson, more so than Alabama, I think, took advantage of a weak conference to get back there. And that's why everyone's saying now they don't stand a chance of getting back.
Well, that's what, like, that's my argument, though, to like, I completely agree with you, but I think a lot, like, my argument would be in the BCS, they still make it in the national, like, they still make it in the national championship game. They probably be number 2 each one of those years.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
and BCS was even more subjective because you have an
Yeah.
undefeated Auburn team not getting a chance to go.
Right.
And meanwhile, USC is just, I think, like 55-12 or something like that was the final score of that against Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And you have an undefeated Auburn team sitting there with Jason Campbell and Cadillac and Ronnie Brown.
Just wanting their chance.
Yeah, on that team. So it's just, we've moved forward with the 4 team, but I don't understand the argument against, because the argument I think a lot of people have is it takes away the value of the regular season. Does it?
Yeah.
Cam, does it?
No.
Because
I'm
we're sitting
agreeing
here
with you.
right now and we can make a legitimate argument for probably 20 or so teams.
No, the regular season is pretty valuable. I'm not.
But I don't think the
Yeah.
value gets cut down because you expand it to 8 or 12.
No, it makes it even more valuable.
Well, it keeps you more engaged.
Yeah,
I would
mean,
say, because if it's a
yeah.
2-team, if it's a 2-team national championship, then you have maybe 12 fan bases that are still interested right now.
I'll give
Right.
you a prime example. It was a couple of years ago. Georgia had
Maybe 12.
2
Yeah.
losses. Lost to LSU on the road, and then lost to Bama in that close SEC championship game.
Where
Georgia was
Jalen
better
Hurts-
than that. What was it? Number 4 Notre Dame team? Way better.
Yeah.
Way better. So imagine the 2-loss Georgia State. They should be in that scenario. So it would be a lot better. Teams would take, I think, the regular season a lot more serious, knowing like you could still lose 2
But I
games,
also think it
but-
takes away the bias, because it's like
Mhm.
the Big Ten outside of Ohio State has a tough time because it's like, oh, Michigan State got in there and they just got absolutely housed.
Right.
But it's like, yeah, by Derrick Henry
Yeah. Yeah. Look at who
Yeah,
they went up
look who
and
against.
it
Yeah.
was.
Ashawn Robinson and Jaron Reed. Yeah.
Right.
And it's like Connor Shaw, my guy. But yeah, you weren't doing anything against that team.
No.
So it's just,
That happened to a lot of people that year. Yeah.
if you have, say you have a
Yeah.
12-team playoff at the end of the season,
Mhm.
I don't think any of the fascination is gone from what's coming.
Absolutely.
If anything, you're like, man, this is wild.
That would be lit.
Yeah, I mean, people like it, that they just jump to a exaggeration. It's not like we're letting 6 and 6 teams in there. You know what I mean, or
No.
8 and 4 or whatever. I mean, these are
But again,
still
I think the
incredible
perfect
college
argument, I
football
hate to do
teams.
this to you, I think the perfect argument for it is Penn State. Is
Oh, that's understandable.
you lose a close game to Ohio State, and you lose at Iowa at Kinnick, who I think a lot of people would say might be a tougher place to play than Ohio State.
Yeah.
Just based off the atmosphere there. You lose those games, and one of those games you lost because your quarterback got hurt.
Mhm.
And you were up big when you had your quarterback.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I think Penn State's the perfect example of, okay, you slide Penn State in as the 11th seed if they win out.
Yeah.
You slide them in as the 11th seed, but they stand literally 0 chance right now of getting in. And for the
With
people
2
out there
losses,
saying
yeah.
protect the bowls, ask anyone. I am the biggest fan of bowl games there is, because I think as any time that you can give players a free experience, which is like if you get to go to the Bahamas Bowl, if you get to go to the Boca Raton Bowl, or you get to go to the damn Sun Bowl, you get to go stay in a hotel, get everything paid for, you get kind of a vacation, you get to be on TV again, and you get like swag bags and gifts and stuff like that. Like, I'm a big fan of bowl games, but if you're like talking about protecting the importance of bowl games, that's gone.
Yeah, it already is. Yeah, it's been for a while.
Like,
Players.
think about it.
Yeah.
Paul Feinbaum brought up a really good point. He said the first bowl game he ever covered was Alabama playing in the Cotton Bowl. And he said it was just like you felt like an energy, like it's like even though it wasn't for a national championship, still massive because it's the Cotton Bowl.
Yeah.
Last year, the Gators went to the Cotton Bowl, and Dan Mullen said like got his butt kicked by Oklahoma and was like, well, I was playing like my JV team because all my starters were gone. Like, it's already lost that luster.
Yeah.
The only thing you can use it for now is you can say, we've made 4 consecutive New Year's Six bowls.
Yeah.
You think Georgia fans give a rip about that?
Right. And as many great things as you can say about, like, I'm not trying to rip it or whatever, but you say that about the Cotton Bowl.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not a lot of luster or anything like that coming from the Bahamas Bowl either. So, like, us changing it to 12 teams isn't going to take anything away from the Bahamas Bowl.
It's just more football. And if you think that's a bad thing, you get the hell out of here. We got to take a quick break. We're way over. We'll come back after this. Cam, you Feeling some kind of way today?
Nah,
Playing a little John Lennon?
man, nah. I just like the beat. Let's put it like that.
It's a vibe.
It's a vibe. Yeah.
It's a whole vibe. We got the Sean Quinn show coming up here at the top of, or I should say the top, at the middle of the hour. Coming up at 2:30, we will have the Sean Quinn show breaking down their big win, and we got homecoming coming up this weekend. I know you'll be up at Savannah State to cover that one. Any fond memories of homecoming?
Nothing I can say on the air.
Cam.
Nothing I can say on the air.
No,
But the
I mean,
football
like,
games are
let's
fun.
talk just to talk about the experience, the pageantry.
It's fun. They have.
We don't
good-
have to talk about your shenanigans at the tailgate.
Nah, behind the stadium they have like good tent setups, food. You see some of the fraternities, sororities out
I was
there.
gonna say
It's fun.
because I've always heard, and I've been to some Savannah State homecoming games before. Just the difference between like a homecoming at a Georgia or Georgia Southern is you just everybody, all the alumni come back into town and you honor like a former team. Homecoming at HBCU
It's a little
is a whole nother story.
Yeah, it's different. They know how to get down and party, and it's a little different. It's fun. It's very lively. It's like a big family. So I'm ready.
And what's
to see
funny
some
is
friends.
it's an orange out. So when everybody wearing orange, the team will be in all blue.
Oh Lord, I'm not wearing no orange.
You're not an orange fan?
No, I mean I got orange stuff, but I'm not wearing any orange.
Wait, what,
I have my ESPN.
what color will your
Coastal.
shoes be?
Neon green. Kobe Grinch 6s.
I respect that. He's already got it planned out for Saturday. I can tell you what shoes I'm going to be wearing on Saturday. But again, Sean Quinn show coming up next. Going to break down the homecoming game coming up this Saturday. That's up next right here on ESPN Radio.